Robb Stark was crowned king of Westeros, inside the great sept of Baelor. The war had ended, but the realm was broken. His crown was not the Iron Throne's jagged steel. Instead, a simple circlet of northern steel with a shard of smoky quartz, a reminder of Winterfell's strength. The people outside cheered, some from hope, others just glad the killing had stopped. Catelyn stood by his side, whispering, "A king must be more than a warrior." Robb nodded, knowing battles alone would not hold the Seven Kingdoms together. Sansa stood in the crowd, watching quietly. No longer a Lannister pawn, but a Stark ready to serve her family again. When Robb stepped onto the balcony, he promised the people justice, fair trade, and safety. There would be no more unnecessary executions, no more starving streets. His simple, honest words earned murmurs of approval. The Goldcloaks, unsure of their loyalty, began pinning direwolf badges to their sashes. Later, in the Red Keep Solar, Robb gathered his council. Brynden, Blackfish, Catelyn, Sansa, and Maester Orpheus. The map of the Seven Kingdoms lay before them. Robb's plan was simple: stabilize the realm piece by piece. The Reach would keep its harvests, the Stormlands would be offered peace, and Stannis Baratheon would be invited to take a place on the council if he would bend. But before they could finalize anything, a raven arrived from the wall. Its message was short, carved in panic. "The dead walk. We are too few. Send men, send fire." Signed by Lord Commander Jorah Mormont, with a second messy scrawl beneath, "Jon Snow." Robb's face hardened. He had won the throne, but a darker war was coming. Robb Stark sat silently, the raven's letter clutched in his hand. The council around him waited, tension thick in the air. Catelyn was the first to speak, her voice quiet but firm. "The Wall calls for aid, Robb, but you have just taken the throne. If you march north now, the realm will see weakness." Brynden Blackfish shook his head. "The Wall's warnings are never light. Boy, if the dead truly walk, crowns won't matter much when the cold reaches the Trident." Robb stared at the map, torn between duty to his new crown and loyalty to his blood. "Jon wouldn't write this unless it was real," he said finally. "If the dead are moving, the realm is in danger, whether they know it or not." Sansa stepped forward, surprising them all. "Then you must stay here," she said softly. "The realm will tear itself apart without you, but you can send help north without abandoning the throne. If you name someone the Warden of the North, someone the Lords trust, they can command your armies while you keep the realm together." Robb nodded slowly. "Roderick Castle holds Winterfell's loyalty, but we'll need more than that." He looked to Brynden. "Gather the northern bannermen already in the south. They'll march to the Wall with 5,000 men under Stark." "Banners," Catelyn touched his arm. "If you do this, make it known. Let the people see their king protects all of Westeros, not just his crown." Robb agreed. But before he could speak further, Maester Orpheus unrolled another scroll. This one from Highgarden. "The Tyrells request assurances," he read. "They supported your claim, but they fear reprisals from the Reach's enemies if you do not cement an alliance." The council fell into uneasy silence. Without the Tyrells' food, King's Landing would starve within weeks. Robb leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Then we must bind them to us. If Margaery Tyrell is still unwed," Catelyn's brow furrowed, "you'd take her hand." Robb hesitated. He still bore the weight of Talisa's memory, but the realm came first now. If the marriage ends bloodshed and fills our stores, then yes, the North remembers, but it also survives. Brynden grunted approval. A direwolf and a rose on the same banner, that'll make the Lannister remnants think twice. Sansa, listening quietly, finally spoke again. And what of the Lannisters? Robb's eyes darkened. Jaime is still our prisoner. Cersei vanished with her younger son, Tommen. Word is, she fled toward Casterly Rock. If she rallies the West, we'll face rebellion again. Brynden smirked. Then we crush it before it grows. Take Riverrune's strength, the Vale's knights, and your northern steel, and put an end to their banners once and for all. Robb shook his head. Not yet. We don't have the grain, and I won't spend more lives on revenge when winter's at our gates. First, we feed the city. Then, we rebuild trust. Only after that do we settle old debts. As the council ended, Robb stepped onto the balcony, looking out over King's Landing. The city was scarred, its streets blackened by fire, but for the first time in months, it was quiet. He knew peace would not last between the Wall, the Tyrell bargain, and the Lannisters waiting in the shadows. Storms were gathering, and in the distance, somewhere beyond the neck, the winds carried whispers of icy footsteps. The next morning, King Robb Stark summoned his court in the great hall of the Red Keep. The air was heavy with the smell of smoke and damp stone. But the people came, lords, merchants, and small folk alike. For the first time since his coronation, Robb would speak not just to his council, but to the realm itself. Westeros stands divided, he began, his voice steady but edged with steel. The war is won, but the wounds remain. Houses quarrel, the people starve, and the north faces a darkness older than thrones. This crown is not a prize, it is a duty. I will see this realm whole again, or die trying. The words rippled through the hall. Some bowed, some whispered, and some, especially the Reach and Stormland lords, exchanged guarded looks, weighing his strength. After the court dispersed, Robb retreated with Sansa and Catelyn to a smaller chamber. The direwolves Grey Wind and Lady's surviving pup padded silently at their feet. Sansa poured wine, her hands no longer trembling the way they once had. The Tyrells agreed to your proposal, she said quietly. Margaery will come to King's Landing within a fortnight. Lady Olenna insists on bringing half her household with her. Robb nodded. Let her. I want the Tyrells close where we can see them. But Brynden entered then with grim news. Scouts from the west, he said, tossing a sealed parchment on the table. Cersei's at Casterly Rock. She's rallied Kevin Lannister and what's left of their armies. Gold flows like water from the rock, and they're hiring from Essos. If they rise again, they'll strike fast. Robb leaned forward. Let her try. We'll send ravens to the Vale and Dawn. If the Lannisters move, I want allies at our flanks. Sansa hesitated before speaking. Dawn, they still hate the North for what happened to Ilya Martell. And the Vale's lords won't follow easily, unless Lord Arryn commands it. Robb looked at her sharply. Then we give them reasons. Dawn wants justice for Ilya, so do we. The Vale wants protection from the Ironborn raids. Promise them our fleets will defend their coasts. At that moment, Maester Orpheus entered, pale as bone. He carried another raven scroll, its wax blackened and broken. From Castle Black, your grace, he said softly. Robb seized the letter, eyes scanning the rough writing. His knuckles whitened. The dead are no rumor, he whispered. They've breached the fist of the first men, half the knights. Watch is lost. Catelyn's face drained of color. Then the wall will fall. Brynden swore under his breath. And if the wall falls, winter walks through the door. Robb turned to his mother, to his sister, to the men who had followed him through fire and blood. We cannot face this threat divided. From dawn to the north, the living must stand together or fall as one. Sansa studied her brother carefully. Then you'll need more than lords and armies, she said softly. You'll need symbols. The people must believe in something greater than fear. Robb considered this and finally nodded. Then we'll give them a reason to believe. That evening, a royal decree was announced. The 7 kingdoms would send aid to the wall. Every house would contribute men, grain, and steel. Those who refused would answer to the crown. It was a gamble, one that could win loyalty or spark rebellion far away, beyond rivers and mountains. The White Walkers marched silently south, and in the darkness of Casterly Rock, Cersei Lannister smiled at the chaos Robb's command would bring. 2 weeks later, King's Landing stirred with new tensions. The Tyrell banners now flew alongside the direwolf over the Red Keep, but peace was a fragile mask. Margaery Tyrell arrived with a procession so grand it stretched from the city gates to the keep's steps. Her beauty turned heads, but her grandmother, Olenna, drew more whispers than the bride-to-be. The Queen of Thorns wasted no time in testing the young king's resolve at the welcome feast. Alina leaned toward Robb, her sharp gaze cutting through the noise of singers and laughter. "Your Grace," she said sweetly, "my roses do not bloom without sunlight, water, and promises kept. Higarden expects its reward." Robb sipped his wine calmly. "The Reach will have protection, trade rights, and security at our borders. That is the promise I give." She smirked. "And Margaery will have a crown." Robb hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded. "She will be queen." Sansa, seated nearby, glanced at him with quiet understanding. She knew the cost of this alliance. And so did Catelyn, though her silence revealed her disapproval. Robb had sacrificed his heart for stability, a choice no king could escape. But even as alliances were forged, cracks deepened elsewhere. Ravens from the Riverlands carried troubling news. Frey riders had been spotted gathering near the Trident. House Frey, once bitter about Robb's broken betrothal, now whispered rebellion under Lord Walder's crooked teeth. Brynden Blackfish slammed his fist on the council table when he heard it. "The old weasel smells blood. If the Freys rise, they'll choke the Riverlands from within. We cannot fight the Lannisters, the dead, and the Freys at once." Robb said grimly, "Send envoys. Remind Lord Walder that his grandsons hold lands by our decree. If words fail, then steel will answer." Before plans could be set in motion, another shadow fell over the council, the Ironborn. Scouts reported that Balon Greyjoy had launched new raids along the western coast, burning fishing villages and seizing ships. "They strike while we're distracted," Robb muttered, gripping the edge of the table. "We cannot send the northern fleet. They're already gathering supplies for the war." Sansa spoke softly, surprising the room again. "If the Ironborn want chaos, deny them it. Offer them what they crave most, legitimacy. Give Theon Greyjoy a lordship under your crown, and demand his father's loyalty." Brynden scoffed. "Trust a Kraken, never." Robb thought carefully. "If Theon swears loyalty before the court, we'll have a chance to bring Pike into the fold without bloodshed. But if he refuses, we deal with them the Stark way." As the council broke, Robb stepped onto the balcony overlooking the Blackwater Bay. The sea was restless, waves crashing hard against the shore. Beside him, Catelyn finally spoke, her voice low and heavy. "You're trying to hold 7 kingdoms together while shadows close in on every side," she said. "But kings bleed, Robb, and when they bleed, wolves and lions alike come running." He turned to her, his jaw set. "Then let them come. The North doesn't kneel, and neither will its king." Yet that night, in the quiet of his chambers, Robb read Jon Snow's latest letter by candlelight. The wall's defenses were failing faster than expected. Wildling hosts had gathered under a king of their own, Mance Rayder, and the dead moved with them like silent hunters. And while Robb prepared for marriage and politics, beyond the wall, a different war was already being lost. The bells of the Great Sept tolled once more, this time not for war but for marriage. King Robb Stark stood beside Margaery Tyrell, their hands bound in silken ribbon, sealing an alliance meant to hold a fractured realm together. The streets of King's Landing erupted in cheers as flowers rained from balconies. But beneath the celebration, unease simmered. Sansa watched quietly from the crowd, her smile soft but distant. She had coached Margaery on courtly whispers and the moods of lords, but in her heart she carried an ache she could not name. Robb caught her gaze for a fleeting moment, offering the smallest nod, as if to remind her they were still Starks, still family even here, surrounded by lions and roses. That night, at the wedding feast, the great hall glittered with gold, and lords raised cups in Robb's honor, singers sang of direwolves and victories, and Margaery played her role, flawlessly graceful, kind, and clever enough to charm even the hardest northern bannermen. Yet amidst the joy, Brynden Blackfish leaned close to Robb's ear, his voice rough as gravel. "Your Grace," he murmured, "we have word from the west. Cersei's banners are gathering faster than expected. 1,000 Sellswords from Essos have already joined her cause. Kayvon Lannisters securing the Golden Tooth, and their coffers are spilling over with rock gold." Robb's jaw tightened. "She means to test us. She means to burn us," Brynden replied. "And she's cunning enough to let someone else light the fire first." Before Robb could answer, another messenger arrived, dusty from days on the King's Road. A raven from Riverrun had carried troubling news. Lord Walder Frey had summoned all his sons and grandsons to the Twins. Catelyn's face paled when she read the message. "He plots vengeance," she said softly. "We shamed him once, Robb. He will not forgive twice." "We'll send gifts," Robb said. "Grain, silver, whatever his pride demands." Brynden frowned. "And if pride is not what he wants, then he'll have my steel," Robb answered, his voice sharp. But threats from the south soon joined those from the west. That same night, Maester Orpheus delivered yet another letter, its edges marked with soot. "From Pike," he announced. "Balon Greyjoy declares himself king of the Isles and the North. He claims Winterfell as his by right of conquest." Robb slammed his fist onto the table, the sound echoing through the hall. "Winterfell will never belong to Crockens," he growled. Catelyn laid a hand on his arm. "Robb, you cannot fight wars on 3 fronts. The North bleeds, the West plots, and the dead still march beyond the wall." Her words hung heavy, but Robb's answer was steady. "Then we make allies where we must. If the Greyjoys will not kneel, the Manderleys will rise. If the Freys betray us, the Blackfish will hold the rivulet. And if Cersei strikes, she'll find the wolves and roses together." That night, Robb stood alone on the balcony of his chambers, grey wind resting at his side. Beyond the city walls, the torches of his campfires burned like fallen stars against the dark. He thought of Jon, standing on the frozen wall, facing shadows older than kings. He thought of Winterfell, scarred and silent. He thought of the realm he had won and the storms that were closing in. Far away, in the torchlit depths of Casterly Rock, Cersei Lannister poured wine into a golden cup. Her spies whispered of Robb's marriage, of Tyrell banners in King's Landing, and of the Crown's decree demanding aid for the wall. Cersei smiled faintly, her eyes cold. "Let the boy king spread himself thin," she said to Sir Kavon. "The more pieces he moves, the easier it will be to break his board." And as the waves crashed against the rock, the Game of Thrones entered a deadlier stage than ever before. The weeks after Robb's wedding were anything but peaceful. King's Landing was alive with whispers, some sweet, some poisonous. Tyrell banners decorated the Red Keep, but beneath the gold and green lay sharp thorns. The Reach Lords celebrated their new power, yet northern bannermen grumbled quietly. Wary of southern games, Robb sensed the tension growing, especially within his own court. Margaery was clever, too clever, perhaps. She smiled sweetly, soothed quarrels, and charmed the lords of the realm. But Alena Tyrell's hand guided every move. During council sessions, Tyrell demands grew louder. More lands, more influence, more grain rooted south. One evening, during a private council, Brynden Blackfish spoke bluntly. "Your Grace, we've tied a rose to the direwolf's tail, but make no mistake, the Tyrells play their own game. They think Margaery wears this crown as much as you do." Catelyn's voice was tight but calm. "We needed their strength, Robb. You made this choice. But you must remember, an alliance is not loyalty." Robb nodded, but before he could answer, Maester Orpheus entered with a scroll bearing the Stark seal from the wall. The letter was from Jon Snow. "Robb," it began, written in Jon's steady hand. "The dead have moved past the fist. Mance Raider's host grows daily, wildlings gathering in tens of thousands. We've sealed the gates of Castle Black, but our strength won't last the winter. Send us steel, send us men, or win the wall. Falls, the south will burn." Robb closed the letter, his chest tight. "The wall cannot stand alone," he said. "I'll send more men north." But Brynden frowned. "We've already dispatched 5,000. Send more, and you weaken your... Hold here. The Lannisters gather, the Freys plot, and Balon Greyjoy still raids your coasts. We cannot fight ice and fire both." Robb's jaw tightened. "Then we make others fight beside us. Summon the Stormlords, the Vale, and Dawn to a council. If the dead come south, it will be all of Westeros that bleeds, not just the north." The next morning, ravens were sent to Sunspear, the Eyrie, and Storm's End. But answers would take time. Time Robb didn't have, because while the king planned alliances, his enemies acted in the shadowed halls of Casterly Rock. Cersei Lannister and her brother Kavon finalized their plans. Gold bought more sellswords from Essos. Assassins were whispered into King's Landing, disguised as merchants and servants. Cersei had learned patience at last, letting Robb weaken himself with too many battles, too many promises, and too many enemies. And at the Twins, Lord Walder Frey gathered his brood for a secret feast. Around his table, he cursed the name Stark, mocking Robb's crown and his broken vow. "He shamed us before all the realm," he rasped, his voice like dry leaves. "But the wolf pup forgets. Rivers run red before they run free." Back in King's Landing, Sansa Stark felt the shift in the air before Robb did. She overheard whispers in the garden, Reach ladies murmuring of secret meetings, northern lords buying sellswords in the city, and spies vanishing into the night. When she came to Robb with her warnings, he placed a hand on her shoulder and smiled faintly. You hear things I don't, little sister. Keep listening. Tell me where the shadows move. That night, Robb stood atop the Red Keep's highest balcony, grey wind at his side. The moonlight caught the city's burned stones, the jagged river, the glittering bay, his kingdom, fragile and vast. Far beyond that view, though, the wall trembled beneath the weight of endless snow and marching dead. And somewhere in the haunted lands beyond, pale blue eyes opened by the thousands. Winter was no longer coming. Winter was awake. The first blow didn't come from Cersei, the Freys, or the Ironborn. It came from inside the walls of King's Landing itself. One cold morning, the bells of the Red Keep rang not for celebration but alarm. A riot had erupted in Flea Bottom. Starving small folk demanding food, justice, and answers. Robb's decree of sending grain north to the wall had angered many, and whispers in the streets claimed the new king cared more for snow and shadows than his own people. Robb rode out personally with grey wind at his side, flanked by northern guards and gold cloaks. The crowd parted when they saw the dire wolf, but voices still shouted, "Bread before crows, King of the North, not of us. Give us a lion, not a wolf." Robb dismounted, planting his boots firmly on the cobblestones. "You will have food," he said loudly, his voice carrying above the chaos. "Ships from the Reach arrive within days. No child will starve in this city while I rule." The words calmed some, but others hissed his name like a curse. Sansa later warned him, "The whispers are spreading faster than the grain will arrive. Someone is feeding them." Brynden Blackfish agreed. "Cersei's gold," he said grimly. "She's turned the small folk against you before she even draws her sword." Meanwhile, darker news arrived from the Riverlands. A Stark envoy sent to the twins had not returned. Days later, his body washed ashore along the Trident, throat slit and hands bound. Lord Walder Frey's message was clear. There would be no peace. Catelyn's face was pale when she read the report. "Robb, the Freys mean to betray us. They gather strength quietly, but not for defense." Robb slammed his palm onto the council table. "If they rise, we crush them swiftly. We cannot let Walder's treachery embolden others." But Brynden warned caution. "Strike too soon, and we leave the city weak. Strike too late, and the Freys choke the Riverlands." Before they could decide, another raven came from the wall. This one stained with ash, its words written in Jon Snow's hand. "Robb, the wall will not hold much longer. The dead have reached the gorge. We fought them with fire and steel, but they do not fall as men do. We are outnumbered. If we cannot hold Castle Black, all 7 kingdoms will fall." Robb read the letter in silence, jaw tight, knuckles white. Then he looked up at his council. "Summon the lords," he said. "All of them. Dawn, the Vale, the Reach, even the Stormans. If they will not come willingly, we drag them here. They must understand this is no northern tale. This is war for the living." But the lords were not united. In the weeks that followed, envoys returned with excuses, conditions, and threats. The Vale refused without a marriage pact. Dawn demanded justice for Ilya Martell before committing a single sword. The Stormlords were divided between loyalty to Stannis and bitter rivalry with his name. Only Margaery's presence kept the Reach steady for now. She spoke softly to Robb one evening in the gardens, where lanterns swayed in the wind. "You cannot save them all at once," she warned. "Win their hearts, then their swords will follow. But if you seem desperate, they will bleed you dry before they lift a finger." Robb nodded, but his gaze drifted northward, past the stars. "I don't need their swords for me," he murmured. "I need them for the wall." That night, a raven from Casterly Rock arrived, its seal crimson, and heavy inside was a single note, written in Cersei's elegant hand. "The lion does not fear the snow, but the wolf should fear the storm." Robb stared at the letter for a long time before burning it in the brazier. Winter was no longer a distant threat. It was on the march, and so were his enemies. The war Robb feared finally came, but not the one he expected. Before Spring's first thaw, the wall fell silent. No ravens, no riders, no word from Jon Snow. A month later, wildling scouts were spotted south of the wall, ragged and fleeing, their voices cracked with terror. "The dead are coming," in King's Landing. Panic spread faster than fire. Robb gathered his council in the war room, the map of Westeros scattered with carved direwolves, roses, stags, and suns. Brynden Blackfish slammed his fist on the table. "We must march north now. If we wait, we fight corpses in the streets of the capital." Catelyn nodded gravely. "And if we march north, the Lannisters strike us in the back." It was a choice. No king should have to make, defend his throne or defend the realm. Then came word from the Riverlands. The phrase had risen. Lord Walder had allied himself with Cersei, his banners marching toward Riverrun. The old weasel had waited until Robb was stretched thin and now struck like a dagger in the dark. Margaery urged caution. "If you leave King's Landing undefended, Cersei will seize it. But if you stay, the dead overrun the north. The Tyrells will honor their vows, but even our strength cannot hold the city and fight the darkness both." Robb stood in silence for a long moment before finally speaking. "Then we do neither," he said. "We bring the war to them all." Under his command, the northern forces split in three. One host marched north under Great Sean Umber to reinforce the wall. Another, led by Brynden Blackfish, rode for Riverrun to break the Frey rebellion. Robb remained in King's Landing, gathering allies and preparing the capital for siege. But Cersei moved faster. The Lannister armies, swollen with sellswords, swept down from the west, burning villages and cutting trade routes. They aimed not for King's Landing, but for Highgarden, hoping to shatter Robb's strongest ally. Alina, Tyrell, furious but unbowed, sent every able knight to meet them, leaving the city dangerously vulnerable. Then, as chaos tore through the realm, the true storm arrived. On a pale night beneath a shrouded moon, the first whites crossed the neck. Their dead eyes burned faint blue, their blades cold as memory. Villages were emptied without screams, fires swallowed by falling snow. Great Jon Umber's host met them on the King's Road, 5,000 men with northern steel, and none returned when news reached the capital. Silence gripped the Red Keep. Robb stared at the reports, his knuckles white on the table. "If they've reached the neck, we have weeks." At most, Sansa stepped forward, her voice calm despite the tremor beneath it. "Then send word to every castle, every holdfast, every farmstead. If the living do not stand together now, there will be no one left to rule." Robb nodded slowly, his decision made. "Call the banners, all of them. Stark, Tyrell, Martell, Arryn, Tully, even Baratheon. The wall has fallen, and the dead are at our gates. There is no north, no south. There is only life or death. The last great host of men ever assembled in Westeros marched from the capital weeks later, banners fluttering beneath a steel-grey sky, wolves beside roses, stags beside suns, Dornish spears beside Vale knights. And there, at the Trident's frozen banks, Robb Stark faced his final trial. Across the mist, an army of pale blue eyes waited, silent as stone. Among them stood creatures of ancient nightmare, their armor black as ice, their weapons carved from frozen death itself. Robb raised his sword, the direwolf on his breastplate shining faintly in the dying sun. Grey wind howled beside him, a sound that rolled across the field like thunder. For Winterfell his men cried, for the realm shouted others, for the living. The first charge of the living against the dead shook the earth itself, and far away in the halls of Casterly, Rock, Cersei Lannister, drank her wine and smiled faintly. For in chaos she had always thrived, but she had not yet understood the truth. The Game of Thrones meant nothing if there were no thrones left to claim. As snow fell over the Red Keep, the fate of Westeros balanced on a blade's edge. The boy who became a king leading one last stand, not for power, but for survival.